Welcome back, you happily miserable accursed. For the second week in a row, I'm coming to you from our Curse of Politics satellite office here in Uvita, Costa Rica. And it was a big week in politics. But before we get to all that, I just want to take a second to genuinely thank the 97.3% of you. Yes, I've broken down the numbers. I'm a pollster. That's what I do. For the mostly positive comments about our special guest, Christy Clark's debut last week. The truth is, I thought I was middling, and Scott, you sucked. But Christy, how did it all feel to you last week?
It was fantastic. It's, nice to be back, have the gang back together again. Even though we're kind of, far apart physically and politically now than we were, more than we were then.
Yeah.
It was fantastic.
Good. Scott, do you have more game this week?
I don't know. We'll see. I thought you were middling. And no. I thought I was middling and you sucked.
Oh, okay.
But you feel that I sucked.
Well, somebody had to, and it wasn't me. It's never me.
I got a lot of feedback saying you need to interrupt Scott Reid more. He just goes
that is the truth.
On and on.
That is the truth. All right, so here's what's on for the next 60 minutes or so. We're going to dive right into the Conservative leadership race, which even at this early stage is generating a hell of a lot of heat. Jenny burn marks, you might say. Is Jean Chretien ready for the knife fight? And will there be a Stop Poilievre movement? We'll then talk about Ukraine, specifically how it's impacting politics and political players here in Canada. Here's a first for the show. Our cursed clipping this week is Scott Reid's piece in the Globe about our likely oncoming culture war. I can't wait to hear him shit all over his own writing. And finally, we'll end with our Hey Yous for the week. Christy, Scott, where are you, Christy?
I'm here. Can you hear me? Can you see me?
Are you in Toronto? Where are you located, though? I know you're a world traveler.
I'm downtown Toronto today. Beautiful, warm Toronto.
I'm here. She's got to settle. She's like Aunt Doris. I'm fine. What's that odor?
Hold on. David was having, before you showed up at the very last minute, Scott, on this show, David was having communications problems at his end. So I thought maybe he couldn't hear me or see me suddenly.
That's
just me on the show.
All right.
Yeah.
You look dazzling. You've got like a pashmina blanket wrap thing going on. You look elegant. David, you do not.
Jean Chretien, seemingly poised to enter the race after 9 years out of public life. Coincidentally, that's exactly the same length of time that John Turner was out of public life before coming back in 1984. Chrétien's been out of federal politics for 25 years. Do you think Chretien will be able to seamlessly adapt to current political realities? A lot's changed, not just in his party, but a lot has changed in the way politics is conducted, most notably media, since the time that he was playing. What do you think?
I think it's going to be hard, David. I think, he's not rusty in the way that Turner was, in terms of his manner of speech and his ability to master the facts. He's got what I think is probably a photographic memory. And he's really, really smart. And he's been busy, right? He's been doing tons of stuff. So I don't think he's rusty in the way that Turner was. But I think the thing that you can't keep up with unless you're in it is the 24/7 nature of media now and the constant demands of Twitter and the internet and the kind of the social media world. Like that has just completely revolutionized politics. And I mean, I felt it. When I first got into politics, it first became premier in 2011, people were complaining that I was communicating too much and I was, all over there. We just see too much of her. We don't like the way she looks, whatever, right? And then I ended up...
You're overexposed. Wipe that smile off your goddamn face.
Yeah, that was what it was. Oh, what is she just like to have her picture taken? Oh, these women, blah, blah. So anyway, by the time I left, though, we this was in the midst of this revolution that really got underway when print media became almost irrelevant. By the end of it, we couldn't keep up. And like the premier's office now, new government, right? They're spending $5 million more in just the premier's office. And almost all of that is going to communications. It's totally different now. And I think that is going to be a real challenge for a guy like Chretien versus a guy like Poilievre.
And I don't think it's just about...
Yeah,
I don't think it's just about communications either. I think that it actually speaks to the underlying shift in technology, which now animates and drives politics, right? And particularly from an internal standpoint, from party politics and the fundraising, the engagement issues, the whole current philosophy on make certain you feed your base and make certain step one always in contemporary politics is make sure that you've got your own group riled up and angry and motivated and ready to go out and vote and to donate. All of that is a function of media as well, social media. And I just think, I mean, that's where you see the natural inclination toward disinformation because you want to feed people what they believe. It's more important. There's no point in if you're trying to get money and support out of people, there's no point in trying to change their mind. You just want to convince them what they're saying is right and that you're with them. And so you see that kind of that sharpened, serrated edge of somebody like Pierre Poilievre, which is, I think, is part of why he's so successful in this milieu. And I mean, I like Jean Chretien. I've worked with him too. I mean, obviously not in the way you have, Christy, but I think he's an enormously talented guy. I obviously, as a liberal, I prefer where he comes from as a centrist and a representative of brokerage politics. I just think that party has moved on, animated by these shifts in technology and media, driven by a much harder philosophy that it's got to be populist grievance politics. I just think that I don't think they have any truck or trade with him. And so the only way he could win is to do something that doesn't seem like the Jean Chretien I know, which would be to say, all right, I got to target 120 ridings across the country, and I have to sell tens of thousands of memberships distributed across those strategically in the right place. Some I'll win with 100 votes, 100 memberships. Some I'll win with 70. Some I'm going to need 1,600. And I just don't, I mean, it's got to be a takeover. It's got to be a hostile takeover. Does he have the steam, the time, the resources to do that? I don't know. I think he's going to get shredded.
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, don't underestimate his ideological flexibility.
Yes, that's true.
When he ran as PC leader in 1997, his campaign was run by Leslie Noble and Tom Long, and he had basically adopted the Common Sense Revolution team and Common Sense Revolution platform of Mike Harris.
Yeah, that's true.
So he can be a Quebec premier who loves climate change and is against guns, or he can be Mike Harris. He can move, this guy. And so I suspect he's not going to run the lefty kind of campaign that liberals are hoping he's going to run for that leadership.
Mm-hmm. I think that's true. I do think, though, he is going to be the best qualified person to go to the different regions of the country and say, I feel your pain. I mean, I do think that there's a play for him in places like British Columbia, some ridings in Calgary, where he's going to be able, and in Alberta, where he's going to be able to go in and say, look, I'm a Quebecer. This is where you guys have a problem with your resource industries. Let me go in and fight for you on this stuff. Because he's got good, strong economic credentials in people's minds. So I think he's going to have a play, but I think Scott's right. Like, the hard thing is, you got to sign up members. You got to make the members.
He's the candidate of the salons of Central Canada and of the homeless moderates out there that bemoan the loss of the PC party and some who bemoan the loss of blue liberals. So that's who supports him.
Yeah.
I don't know that base generates big numbers in a leadership selection vote. I don't know. They need to sell tens of thousands of memberships to swarm the existing membership base, plus to offset whatever Poilievre and Leslyn Lewis and whoever else are going to sell. Mm-hmm. So, and he needs to do that. If they hold the vote in June, they've got a 21-day cutoff. So that effectively gives you March and April to move memberships. And they've got to move a shitload of them. I don't see where you go to get them, like if you've got special interests that are backing you, where to go and get those numbers. But if you're just looking for the great unwashed, it's hard to find them.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Like, go to the people, right? And who are the people that are going to do stuff? He's being solicited nonstop in a way which I'm sure feels like a tsunami of support to him, right? But there are emails and phone calls from folks that sit around in the Albany Club and talk about the way it ought to be. And they're going to run into the absolute buzzsaw that is our friend Jenny Byrne. And she's going to be selling memberships, holding people to account on a riding by riding basis on social media, as we've seen already, raising Huawei, talking about how defining Charest as anti-oil and anti-West.
Every campaign needs a spear carrier. I've done that job several times.
Absolutely. And I don't think that Jean is prepared for the skin 'em alive attitude that politics in this moment within the Conservative Party as it currently is composed is going to deliver to him. It's just going to be like, there'll be no Queensberry rules. It's just going to be pure fucking knife fight.
I wouldn't underestimate how tough Charest is. He is he's a Quebec politician who stood up for Canada in the midst of, tons of passionate people who didn't want Canada to succeed. I mean, he went through all that. And for years and years afterwards, he had people saying to him on the streets, you're a traitor to our nation. So I think he's a little tougher than perhaps Scott, you do. But I just think that the hard work of making members is just hard work, and you've got to have tons of active political operatives. And the other thing he's got to figure out, and I think he'll get some of those, I think from surprising places. And David, like you said, it's these homeless federal liberal types like me who are likely to kind of, who can help, who probably would in weird places in the country. But I just think he's got to start thinking too about where he's going to get his second. So is Patrick Brown going to come in?
He needs Patrick Brown to run. He needs Patrick Brown to run, because otherwise he's got you can't win on the first ballot because it's a proportional representation system. So nobody's going to get more than 50%. But where's his second ballot support come from?
Exactly.
Right now?
Like Andrew Wilkinson became the leader of the BC Liberal Party. He was 5th on the first ballot. Mm-hmm. And I mean, and Scheer was 11 or something on the first ballot. So weird stuff happens, but he's got to corner those seconds. I don't know how that's all going to work inside their party. Wait.
I want to ask you guys a question. So do you guys both then agree that Charest needs Patrick Brown to run? Yes. And is it more important for him to have Patrick Brown in the race as a candidate, whipping up support in the GTA and elsewhere? You think about the Bramptons and the Mississaugas, where he'll be able to sell large membership numbers. Or what if Brown didn't run but provided his support to Charest?
A fraction of the memberships.
That's what I think.
You move a fraction of the memberships.
People aren't as motivated. His team, you bubble down, right? By the time you get to the Church Street level, those people aren't as motivated. They're not doing it. They're not doing it for Brown.
Although what's interesting about team is that you would assume that Waleed Solomon would be behind both of these candidacies.
Yeah, you would, wouldn't you? You'd think that would. I mean, that's a natural connection between them. The Mulroney connection that they have, and Yeah. The other question is too, are these rumors that Harper's going to get involved real? Because I do think that Harper can change things.
Christy?
Wouldn't
he do himself a terrible disservice?
I think it's way beneath him. I mean, when you leave politics, you walk off the field and you leave the devastation and the corpses behind. Like that's, and you look back fondly, hopefully are remembered fondly. But the minute you walk back in there, you are diminished in every possible way. There's no way Harper should come back and do that. I mean, you don't see Chretien and Martin and coming in and trying to affect the outcome of Liberal leadership. So I just think it would be a terrible idea. But
they just show up and raise the hand of whoever won. That's what they do.
Yeah, but Harper can hold a grudge.
Vive the Canada! I like the new guy. That guy? Not me. But when I was there, I was better than this guy. Let's be honest. That's how that goes. That speech every fucking time. Good guy, not as good as Jean Chretien, son of Welly.
So for a few weeks now, we've been telling a story about 5G and how our presenting sponsor TELUS believes we're at a critical inflection point on how we get this 5th generation wireless connectivity right across all of Canada, not just in our big cities, but all rural, remote, and Indigenous communities. We've thrown technical terms at you like 100 megahertz caps and mid-band spectrum, and other concepts like spectrum squatting. And maybe you're listening and thinking, well, these things don't really apply to me, Mr. Hurley-Burley. I don't squat on any spectrum. Tell me how this affects my family or the job I do. Okay then, this is chapter 6 in our story, how 5G gets from the farm to your fork. Agriculture, farmers, ranchers, and all associated agribusinesses are in the midst of a digital revolution. The entire sector has an opportunity to use 5G-enabled technologies to dramatically improve the world's food supply safely and sustainably. Real-time, precision farming practices, which help immensely in the fight against climate change, and the connecting of all the links that make it possible for a carrot to get from the farm to your table far more efficiently. Stuff like an autonomous robot that uses lasers to target and destroy 100,000 weeds an hour without disturbing any of the soil or actual crops. Or how about a tool that uses cameras to identify and count insects in the field in real time, so instant decisions can be made about treatment without significant crop loss. It all has the potential to add $40 billion to our GDP within the next 5 years. There's just one problem. Right now, only 37% of households in rural and remote areas of Canada have reliable connectivity. And as you know, Hurly-Burlyites, that's where farmers live and produce the food we eat. The feds are having public consultations right now on how to auction this new critical mid-band of 5G. TELUS believes the faster we get it to every single household in Canada, urban and rural, the faster we all benefit. The story continues next week, but you can have your say right now at telus.com/get5G-right.
I have a funny Chretien story, which is
Okay.
after I got into office, he phoned me and he wanted me to do something for something, some
Russian
charity
oligarch.
thing or whatever he was involved in. And so he phones me and we're talking, and I was sucking it up to him. Of course, he's a former prime minister and I admire him. And he starts going on and on about how, Paul Martin, if he had his way, the banks, they would be all little tiny banks, and we would never have withstood the crisis, the economic. And I'm sitting there thinking, Mr. Chretien, you are the most successful prime minister in Canadian history. And you're complaining about one of your opponents all these years later. There is a man who was, he's the proof that if you are tough and you never forget, it can affect you for the rest of your life, but it can also be a huge recipe. It could be part of the recipe for success.
He never forgets.
Your story is one of a million pieces of evidence that he would never have resigned that job. He was going to be carried out by his boots out of that job. Right?
And just for the motherfucking record, since we are writing history here on this podcast, Chretien did not oppose the bank mergers. It was Paul that drove that process. So truth.
So Poilievre's response to Charest's candidacy is really interesting to me. I think it's very revealing, and it goes a bit to your article, which we'll talk about shortly, Scott. But they're not saying he's too old. They're not saying he's out of touch. They're not saying he's got the wrong policies. They're saying he's not part of the family. He doesn't belong. He's disqualified from running. He's a liberal. By defining a former PCer that way, they're conducting an ideological purity test that says that the Harper wing of that party defines that party. It's a very aggressive, hardline response to a leadership campaign.
Yeah, but it's the kind of thing that happens in leadership. It goes back to your very central point. First of all, I think it's a particular statement on where the Conservative Party is right now in this moment, right? As it's decided that it's going to throw its lot in with this kind of populist grievance politics, which again goes to the thing that I wrote. But then it is also what you were saying earlier, which is that, these are civil wars and the fault lines are internal. And, when Paul was running and people were angry with you and me, David, and you and Christy were screaming at each other on the street, it was because people were saying, we got thrown a lot of, he's a fucking business liberal. He's not a real liberal. He's not a real, Jean was a real liberal, you get that kind of stuff. That's what's happening now is Charest is tagged and will be tagged aggressively as not a real conservative. And one of the litmus tests is going to be around energy. I think energy is going to start to be used as a sword, both in this leadership as Charest enters, and then later in the general election. I was talking with our friend Brooke last night about this, and Brooke Piggott, and I think energy policy is we're not talking about how do we find an accommodation on a carbon tax? That ain't going to happen like it did under O'Toole. This is going to be, energy policy means you're either for the West, against the West. It's a cultural thing, and it's going to be used as a sword in the leadership and in the election coming.
Yeah. That's such a shame for two reasons, right? I mean, first, Paul Martin, Jean Chretien, one was a business liberal, one was not a business liberal or whatever. At the end of the day, they both ended up being very conservative minded people on the fiscal policy side, which was great for Canada. And they both ended up being people who really fought for Canada. This history that we have this habit we've gotten into of demonizing entire regions of the country is a recipe for failure. I mean, Canada can't succeed if we think we can't succeed fiscally if we cut off energy. There's no doubt about that. Canadian healthcare, goodbye. But how can you hold the country together when the West has been demonized, when it's kind of like we really speak a different language now. And Canada desperately needs politicians who are going to bridge that between Quebec in particular and Western Canada. But that's been a perennial problem. And Trudeau has just done so much to exacerbate that divide for political reasons. And that's just been, and the Conservatives have taken it up with vigor as well from the other side. As we're really, I think Canada's in a really bad place right now. And as Scott, as you said in your article in the Globe and Mail, it's this parsing of where the votes are, which vote am I going to get, how am I going to win in each riding by 1% or 100 votes or whatever it happens to be. Nobody cares about representing all of Canada anymore.
No, money, the advertising money follows an algorithm.
Yeah.
Right?
That's right. And it might go to, it might go anywhere. It might go to minimum wage. It might go to housing. It might go anywhere. They're disconnected from whatever the meta narrative of the campaign might be.
But it's definitely not going into Peace River.
No.
Yeah.
But the only thing I would say, in addition to what you were just saying there, Christy, when it comes to energy policy, I do think sometimes, it's a policy challenge that we shouldn't understate either, right? At the end of the day, there's just it isn't just about saying, well, how do we sort of bring everybody together as much as possible? I've been critical of the Trudeau government. I don't understand why 2 years ago, even before COVID hit, we weren't starting up a national transition program to try to really help those companies and workers in particular that would be affected by this energy transition, spending literally billions of dollars, doing the national equivalent of a cod fishery transition and support package. But there is also some irreconcilable choices that have to be made. If you're at some point, you can't suck and blow on this stuff, right? At some point, there's going to be a point where you're going to say, well, fossil fuels, we're either going to start to move it, dwindle it down, or not. And I think that fault line, is going to get really nastily exposed in this next election.
I think that's true. I do think, though, that the federal government has they have no game plan to get this done, right? So when you think about energy transition, you think about who's the really bad guy here? It's coal. Who's the next target? It's oil. Who's the next target? It's natural gas. And so let's figure out, first of all, how to get rid of coal around the world, how to stop everybody from using coal. And then let's figure out how to, get to work on the other ones as we start to think of them as transitional fossil fuels as we get there. But meantime, Quebec is buying more Saudi oil than anywhere else in the country. We're talking about a country that, brings people into the embassy alive and packs them out in a suitcase, right? And Quebecers are all fine with that, I guess. Meanwhile, Alberta is sending workers home alive every day and healthy and pensioned and meeting Canadian environmental standards. So there's two things. You got to go after the worst sources first. And then second, as long as we're continuing to use oil, let's use oil that's produced as ethically and cleanly as we possibly can. And those, and then start.
But what I understand about this, Christy, and you understand 8 million times more of it. So this is why I just want to interject so you can correct me. My understanding is it isn't governments that are making these decisions about what resources get developed. It's the market. And the market is trending internationally, is trending away from oil. And within the oil bucket, it's trending away from Canada.
Well,
that's the market.
Well, let's look at oil's over $100 now. It's oil's gone back up. Pandemic depressed it. I don't think oil is going anywhere anytime soon, and certainly not natural gas. World's going to need that in order. Our big challenge right now is to get India and China off coal, because that's having the biggest impact around the world. So let's do that by exporting natural gas. But David, if we had been
nukes. I know you got gas you want to sell, but nukes.
I agree. Let's do it. But let's figure out how to get our natural gas to Europe, for example, which really could have used it instead of being dependent on the Russians, right? An ethical source of gas from a country they can trust and count on. Instead, they're all dealing with this corrupt autocracy in Russia. So I don't know. I feel like the government has really buggered this thing up. And there is a way to get to net zero. There's a way to think of these things in terms of transitioning out, but they haven't figured it out. That's for sure.
So the winter out west in the past week has been vicious. And now there are reports of another atmospheric river descending on the Pacific Northwest. Sometimes it feels like there's just no let up. But our sponsor, CN, would like to point out a few realities. Trains must roll, period. That is a non-negotiable central fact of our modern economy. Polar cold and deluges of rainfall notwithstanding. Thing is, a modern train is a vastly complicated assemblage of moving parts. An unexcelled means of cargo transport weighing tens of thousands of tons. A thing that big, and it is one of the biggest things on Earth, must roll safely. The term freight train may have become slang for unstoppable, but let me assure you, that's just foolish slang. A train must be reliably stoppable. In Canada, that means accounting for some of the harshest weather anywhere, levels of cold that would quickly paralyze most normal machinery, the sort of weather some parts of the country are experiencing right now. So a CN train is almost over-engineered, packed with technology and operated under strict rules. In winter, now, that requires constant vigilance against the damage snow, ice, and frigidity is capable of inflicting on tracks, machinery, and performance. Particularly with respect to braking, which sort of has to be beyond excellent to deal with the inertia of a moving train. Because deep cold attacks hoses and couplings, keeping air pressure even is critical. CN ensures vulnerable parts are scrutinized and replaced constantly, and the railway uses special cars designed to amplify and regulate pressure along the entire length of the train. In extremely cold weather, trains are shortened, and they slow down. It happens. There is simply no other way to ensure safe, reliable operation. CN never compromises where safety is concerned. So yes, weather can and does slow down a train. But you know, compared to other methods of heavy transport, say big trucks or ocean-going container ships, a CN train is still the champion of efficiency and reliability. That hasn't changed in 100 years, and it won't.
I guess two things. Wait, I want to say one more thing, David, because we're skipping over something, right? Guilbeault is overdue for the so-called plan. I agree with you that markets, hedge funds, institutional investors, they're dictating where investment will and will not be permitted to go fundamentally. But there is this, the net zero plan is supposed to be coming from Guilbeault. It's been delayed a couple times. He's supposed to present it. Like, what's the unified field theory? What are the steps? Like, what actually happens? And, it's sort of been obscured by the convoy, obviously by Ukraine. But that's going to be a big moment for this government. And, like, how rigorous is that plan? And what are the choices? Because there's no happy place where we can make easy choices and you say, okay, well, we got to net zero without pain and dislocation. It's not going to happen.
Well, but Joe Clark told me on the Hurley Burley.
But they got to be thinking about how do we pay for healthcare? Literally, our resource sector underwrites our universal healthcare system. Okay, you want to get rid of universal healthcare? That's a choice. But it's a choice that you're making when you want to get rid of the resource sector.
Christy, I want my cake and I want to eat it too.
Okay,
and you can't tell me otherwise, all right?
Okay.
Yeah. All right. So, we have a segment on this show called Clippings where we take a news article of the week and we talk about it and analyze it and either praise or dump on the author. And today we're going to talk none other than our own Scott Reid. Was published in the Globe and Mail this week, and if that isn't one of the indicators of the decline of print journalism in Canada, I don't know what is. But Scott Reid was printed in the Globe and Mail today, and here's some of what he had to say. Not today, but this week's. Here's some of what he had to say. Canada's next federal election will be a culture war. It's inevitable. This fate is due to three intersecting events: the unequal burdens of COVID-19, the 23-day occupation of our national capital, and a federal Conservative Party that has surrendered itself enthusiastically to the cause of populist grievance politics. The Conservative celebration of uncivil disobedience, distrust of institutions, and scorn for all those they label as elite forms a new party orthodoxy. By summer, this transformation will be complete with the likely elevation of the barbed-wired Pierre Poilievre to party leader. At that point, culture will become the undisputed fault line of Canadian politics. For these reasons, the coming culture war election cannot afford to be lost. But to win, The incumbent Liberals need to take this threat more seriously and measurably up their game. Two things in particular need to happen. Mr. Trudeau must stay, but he must also adjust. Scott, do you want to take that away and run with it? What were you really trying to say in that article?
Well, first of all, I think the author sounds incredibly wise and ferociously skilled in the sciences of lovemaking, but
tender-hearted
and tender-handed, Dave. Don't forget. Okay, go in soft, brother. Look, what I was trying to say really is I get people will sort of shorthanded say, oh well, you're just talking about the GOP and the Republican right and all that stuff, and in part I am, because we reach into the United States because they have a professional political machine there that that's generated by the money and by the constant elections. But that's where we grab innovation, and I think that Canadian right for some time has been watching, particularly at the federal level, has been watching Brexit, Trump, and they say these guys actually. We were told that if you just went this hardcore populist, that you would be limiting yourself, that you might get 25 or 29% of the vote, but that you could never actually win. Well, these guys have demonstrated that you can win. And so that which wins gets copied. And I think that, when we have this conversation about this, there's all these lazy columns, I feel, that are being written saying, oh, well, there's going to be a fight for the soul of the Conservative Party. Jean Chretien comes in, it'll be a surrogate fight for the soul of the Conservative. I think that fight is over. I think it's been won by Poilievre. I think it's been won by the barefang populism. I think they're committing themselves to grievance politics. It was on full display through COVID. It was on full display during the convoy. And I think that's what we're going to get. And so it's got to be confronted. And the last thing I would say is I think this has massive implications for the Liberals. And it means that Trudeau has got to be better. This sort of smug, superior, like we've got like an insidery kind of cliquish, be with us. You're just opening yourself up to being what your opponent says. So one, I think Trudeau is still their strongest asset. I think he needs to stay. And two, he's going to have to up his game. He's going to have to up his game by dropping that smug superior tone that smothers so much of what this government says. And two, they're going to have to get the bread and butter economics, which is not their comfort zone. But that's where this thing's going to be. Inflation, cost of living, people's anxieties. That's the place where people breed. It won't be about the convoy. Only 28% or where the hell support the convoy. But they'll be fishing in a bigger pond, the Conservatives, with their populist grievance, and it'll be around economic insecurity. And the Liberals don't get there first with a strong bread and butter economic message. Watch out. And so that's kind of the argument I made.
Mm-hmm.
Christy, I'm interested in your overall take on Scott's piece, but I just want to throw a particular point in. When I read it, I thought, the thing that is maybe not quite right about this piece is the culture war only being fought on one side? Or is this a clash between two culture warriors?
That was what I thought too, David, because I think, Scott is totally right about this idea that Harper did change the party profoundly and made it way more ideological. And there's no doubt about that. And, the seeds of Alberta's anger today about being demonized start with Harper really demonizing the rest of the country for not agreeing with Alberta. I mean, it was really just a terrible way to go about it. Although some of his efforts were for good purpose, I thought at the time. But, first of all, I don't think Trudeau is an asset for the Liberals. I think he is a gift to Poilievre because his smug virtue signaling, do nothing government, where they really have achieved when you look at it, they haven't achieved very much. They managed the pandemic, which governments around the world they did a good job. Most governments did do a good job. But boy, he's not leaving much of a legacy, that's for sure. And I just think when Poilievre goes up against Trudeau, he's going to find a culture warrior just like himself. And I think Poilievre could win that culture war because Poilievre is fresh and new. I'm not a big fan. But Trudeau's tired and smug, and he's got that manner that really is starting to grate on people. And I don't think he's going to be able to talk about bread and butter issues. I just don't think he has the intellectual interest in any of those issues. I don't think he understands how the economy and our healthcare system and our social services all fit together, the importance of the banks versus the importance of the, of some of the other things that we do. I just don't think he gets any of those connections. I just don't think he can speak about it intelligently, and he won't, because it's not his comfort zone. If the Conservatives elect someone other than Poilievre, I think you're going to have a different fight there. And that's going to be back to what kind of Mulroney said this week, which is, do you remember when Canada used to be something? Do you remember when Canada used to not be a joke on the world stage? Do you remember when we used to chair the Security Council instead of failing to even be able to get a seat on it? That's going to be the argument, I would think, between a guy like Charest and a guy like Trudeau. And that'll be a different kind of value. That'll be a value about what we are as Canadians and binds us together.
Well, that's a super interesting segue to Ukraine, because I might have agreed with all that a week ago about Canada and Canada's place on the world stage. But it seems different to me after this first week of the Ukraine war. It may be crass to talk about the political implications of what's happening in Ukraine, but the government, in my view, had a good week here in Canada. In fact, I haven't seen many politicians ever have a better week than Minister Freeland had this week, between walking into the Ottawa protests like a Gene Hackman sheriff, and then seemingly being, along with the Prime Minister, quite instrumental in shaping and strengthening the global sanctions response to Russia. It isn't just Canadian newspapers saying this. Politico in the States had a significant piece on the role that Freeland and Trudeau were playing on the phone with world leaders, putting this thing together. It's been impressive to me.
Yeah. I think Freeland has had a good week too, and I think she deserves to. She knows a lot. There aren't very many people in the country in politics who are better connected on this issue than she is. And I think the work on SWIFT was something she did. And she'd been working with the banks for months and months before on other issues, which didn't come to fruition, but she used that as a platform to get this done quickly. So I agree with that. She's done a good job on that. And I think that governments around the world in the West, when we're in a conflict, when democracy is under threat, people want our governments to stand up. And I think Boris Johnson's going to benefit from this. I think Biden's going to benefit from this. I think Macron's going to be reelected. I mean, there's going to be a real uplift for lots of politicians because of this.
The war bounce.
Yeah.
I agree with you guys. I think that the Trudeau government has looked strong, competent, principled, and Freeland has been particularly strong throughout this. But I mean, this issue also provides you with, and not to say that it's obviously extraordinarily complicated, but nevertheless, it's one of those things. People always respond enthusiastically to clarity, and to moral clarity in particular. And this intervention by Russia offers the opportunity for people to dunk on the moral clarity rim, right? Like, because there is a bad guy that is, by virtue of all consensus, the bad guy, and you stand opposed to him. So the more and Freeland is able to seize the moment, because this is something that she's invested enormous energy in and has been personally committed to for not just years, but decades. So like, I have a buddy, from back home growing up who posts like titty jokes and stuff on Facebook most of the time. This is a good old boy who I would think would be the furthest person in the world from being enthusiastic about Christy Freeland, and yet he posted that photograph of her in her dorm room that circulated in media, and it was like, this is real leadership. So you can see that I think she's penetrating beyond just the sort of the political side of ourselves. The question I guess I have, and I'm reaching back a little bit to my own article, which is, this next election ain't going to be fought on the moral clarity of opposing Russia, right? This next election is going to be fought on bread and butter economic issues, on the cost of living. It's going to be fought on the anxieties that people have. It's going to be a much more complicated political soup. And I just don't know, like, when I say Trudeau is the party's best asset, it isn't because I don't think that Freeland didn't shine like a diamond this week. It's just that I don't know that she is going to be well equipped to fight that culture war. I think that she can be easily characterized as, the plutocrat that she wrote about, as compared to being an analyst who was raising the alarm. I think that she can be characterized as endemic to that class. And so that's where I come from on this stuff. I think she's had a great week. I do think that one of the things that's been interesting is how it's been this sort of it's been an awkward week, I think, for the federal Conservatives coming out of the convoy where they've been champions of protest and flinging around the word tyranny. We've now seen that thrown back in their face quite a bit. And maybe that's just two solitudes and it doesn't matter. But you see a lot of people saying, hey, you know what? You guys were bitching and moaning about tyranny. Well, this is actual fucking tyranny, not asking people to put on the mask and get their vaccine before they're able to actually cross the border.
It was an unfortunate juxtaposition for them.
The juxtaposition, I think, has been very awkward and difficult. And politicians from the conservative movement who've tried to associate themselves with the Ukrainian movement, I think, have encountered some pushback.
So, one of the things, the NDP seem to be holding their own in the polls, but I don't know that I've heard about them for months. What's happened to them? There's been big stuff going down in the country, and they are absolutely, to my eye, at the federal level, invisible.
Yeah. It's really weird. Think about guys they used to have these titans like Sven Robinson, who, he's fighting for Sue Rodriguez's right to die. He's out there on the front lines of the HIV/AIDS crisis. He's saying all kinds of stuff. I mean, Sven Robinson wasn't everybody's cup of tea, but boy, the NDP had guys like that, men and women like that. It's not just their leader who is not having an impact. There doesn't appear to be anybody left in the NDP who's really, and I do think that, Jagmeet Singh coming out and supporting the state of emergency, the Emergency Act, was a mistake. I think it was a pretty profound mistake for a New Democrat. Ujjal Dosanjh, the former member of parliament for the Liberals, former NDP premier in British Columbia. I mean, a whole bunch of prominent Democrats came out and opposed that. And I just think they have no purpose, no moral compass, no Twitter presence, and no MPs that really are making any impact. And it's proof of the fact that Trudeau has done a damn good job of moving his party so far to the left, he's eaten them alive. I think that's what's happened.
Their main Twitter presence is Charlie Angus, and I think he's an ankle biter.
Yeah,
is an ankle biter a good thing or a bad thing, David? I don't know.
It's a bad thing. It's a bad thing.
I think he can be effective. He's a kind of a Sven Robinson. He could be this generation's Sven Robinson because he's a rabble-rouser and a troublemaker, but it's not backed up by much within the party. I agree with you guys. I mean, I just think it's what Christy just said. It's the word that Christy used, purpose. And look, people are going to shit all over us. This is a podcast, 3 right-of-center liberals, one of whom governed as almost a conservative. People are going to be like, fuck you people, get a new Democrat on there. And what's the purpose? What is the when I first started working, one of the things that a boss said to me, which I thought was one of the greatest pieces of advice I've ever had, which was, look, no matter what you're doing, make certain that you make yourself indispensable. What is the indispensability of the New Democratic Party right now at the federal level? And I think that's a real, I would literally, if I were them, I would be sitting in a room and I would be talking about that issue and going what is the bargain that we offer to Canada that they can't do without? Because if they can't answer that question, they're just going to drift to the next election and continue to just atrophy, right? They won't be blown up. They'll just shrink and shrink like they have for the last 2 elections.
Scott, one of the things you said in your article, you talked about the bread and butter issue.
Glad we're bringing that back up. It was a hell of a piece, huh? God.
Oh, Matt, you know what?
Lovely. The best writing this side of Rex Murphy.
Yep.
Really.
Yes. Right.
I think it was talking about where are we? Because I think we should be thinking about where we're at on economic inequality in the country. That is a thing. It's a real thing in Canada that we should be talking about. And the NDP, the Liberals, the Conservative, nobody's talking about that. Everybody's talking about these values and what's your identity and all that virtue signaling BS that everybody gets up to. And the really hardcore issues that New Democrats used to fight for have all been subsumed by, but what are you? I mean, how do you classify yourself? I mean, I know you're a white male, but what else? And I just, that's
Thank
just
fucking
that.
Christ, nobody asked me that question.
I don't know. I've never had that question. People just stop at white male. It's just that's it. But don't all those things conflate, Christy? I agree with you strongly, but don't those things conflate in a way that I think is potentially dangerous for the federal Liberals in the sense that, we think about economic inequality. You sort of think that, oh, well, that's a left of center discussion. That's but I think, what's the great source of economic insecurity and economic inequity going to be in the country in the next little while? It's going to be the consequences of the energy transition and the climate challenge, right? It's going to be how, all the people that work in those industries, the threats that they feel, the shrinkage that will occur, and whether government is doing something to give them a hand up or just saying, sorry, shove off. And that's where it gets really dangerous for the Liberals, because economic insecurity could become part of the culture war in a very serious way.
Talking about economic insecurity. Yeah, go ahead, Christy.
The federal Liberals' efforts to kill the economy of Alberta and British Columbia is going to mean that there are millions of Canadians who are without economic means. And so, to me, the right economic policy is to say, look, let's make sure that we get to net zero in the oil sands and in natural gas, and let's produce the most ethical oil in the world. Oil's not going anywhere. We're going to have lots of places to export it who actually care about an ethical, trustworthy source after this disruption out of Russia. And my view is the best way to fight economic inequality is to create really good, high-paying, private sector unionized jobs where people are paying tons of taxes and making lots of money to support their families. But you don't do that when you're trying to actually go to war with the actual economy at the same time. And the NDP are finding themselves doing that. The Liberals are finding themselves doing that. And I don't think Trudeau can stop himself on that front. That's a big problem for the country, because that's what we should be talking about.
Yeah, but you can't avoid the reality, which is that if you're going to have a net zero plan, and if massive investment, institutional investors are withdrawing their source of funds for these industries, Canada's going to have to make that transition, or we're going to pretend that it isn't happening. And 25 years from now, it will be impossible, because it won't be a transition. It'll just be we'll just fall off a cliff, and that'll be it.
This is a subject for this. This is a huge subject, and it's really a subject for a pod in and of itself, because Canadians, in my view, have no idea the pain that is going to accompany the energy transition in Canada and what it means for Canadian standards of living. We can talk all we want about sort of figuring out how to, do new economy shit, but we've basically had a competitive advantage based on our geography that is disappearing on us. And that's going to make Canada a poorer place. I still think we have to do all those things on energy, maybe a little bit more than you do, Christy. But I nonetheless, I'm incredibly alert to what the economic consequences are, and I don't think the country is at all. They think this right now is a painless decision.
I think there's a way to do them, though. I think we can get there. But it doesn't mean shutting it down. That's where the disconnect is, I think, between myself, say, and the current Prime Minister.
All right, let's move to our Hey Yous. Gordon Pinsent, could you please gather the assembled accursed for the Hey Yous?
Ladies and gentlemen, please return to your seats. The Hey Yous are about to begin.
Scott, would you like to start us off today?
Yeah, my Hey You is to the Liberal Party of Canada, government, the Trudeau team. And my Hey You is this. Take one of them. Take one of those front benchers and put them on Poilievre now. You take a look at CPAC convention with Trump this past weekend, attacking Trudeau and attacking Canada. You take a look at the rhetoric that's coming from Canada's right. You take a look at the rhetoric that's coming from Poilievre. This is not an unserious challenge. This is not an unserious threat. And all the bully base of stuff that we're talking about here. And you can't start at the next election. You need to start now. You need to take your most talented spear carrier that's in that federal cabinet, whether it's Dominic LeBlanc, Marco Mendicino, I don't know who you want to pick, but you need to take somebody and say, your job, your primary job when you get up in the morning and when you go to bed at night is to think about how to hammer away on Poilievre and to push back on that. We're going to have, a leadership with Trudeau that's going to sort of figure out what our overall message is and all that. That's going to be the hope part, and they'll do all that. But we need somebody now to start swinging a bat, and it's got to be swinging that bat right now at Poilievre, making his life a living fucking misery. And don't do this smug superior politics. Don't be doing this dismiss it. Oh, nobody takes them seriously. Don't do this thing of, we'll wait until we're not going to give them the pleasure of fighting them now. Fight them now. Fight them now. Fight them every day. Have somebody to be the designated attack dog and let the leash off.
All righty. Christy, got a hey you?
My last week hey you was to, as you remember, Jean Chretien to run for Conservative leader because I felt like the Conservatives need to get back to the center. This week, my hey you is to Justin Trudeau. Step aside. Let somebody come into your party and lead it. Let Anita Anand. Let Francois Philippe Champagne. Let one of those people who are a moderate in your cabinet that nobody ever sees, but we all know are moderates, and just get beat up in cabinet, I'm sure, every week or every month whenever he meets. Let them lead your party. Bring our party back to the center. Somebody who's going to be talking about something of substance and going to be putting Canada back on the national, international stage as a serious player. Somebody who doesn't travel with a tickle trunk and treat foreign trips as opportunities for Mr. Dress Up. Canada should be back. We need both parties to be back. They're important national institutions, and the Liberal Party could be a great national institution again if they choose a new leader, someone who's someone who's a little more in the center.
Big time. Christy shows up with a hey you, Scott, eh?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Hard call. Calling for Trudeau to step aside. That's a big card to play.
You think so? Too early? Too soon?
That's a news media out there. That's a news-making event. Former Premier of BC is calling on Trudeau to step aside and let somebody else come forward. This is my uncolumn.
So I have a more, my hey you is also to the Prime Minister, but it's a more modest proposal, although I thought it was kind of a big idea at the time, but it is a more modest proposal. Prime Minister, I figured it out for you, and I can't imagine how delighted you must be to hear me say that. I've solved this problem for you. I am underwhelmed by Chrystia Freeland as the Minister of Finance. I've not seen the leadership, the growth plan out of finance that I think we need, especially given the energy transition stuff we're talking about. However, Chrystia Freeland greatly impresses me when there's something important to do, whether that is NAFTA, or whether that is clear out the convoy, or whether that is get an economic sanctions package together against Russia and Putin. She gets the shit done, and it's smart, and it's well done. And so I say, relieve her of the Ministry of Finance. Give that to Champagne or Duclos, or there's probably a number of people that could do that job, and make her the full-time Deputy Prime Minister and let her run the fucking thing. Okay? Finance is a full-time job. I've watched several people do it, Mark Lalonde, Paul Martin, Ralph Goodale. It's a full-time job in and of itself, and I think the government needs a full-time Deputy Prime Minister, and I think she's the right person to do it. And so that is my hey you to the Prime Minister today. You two, I can't imagine anything better than talking politics with you for an hour a week. This is great, great, great fun. Thank you both very much. I want to thank our presenting sponsor, TELUS, and our sponsor, CN. And to all of the accursed out there listening and watching, thank you very much for your time this week, and we'll see you next week.